I don't want to interrupt you too much, but we're going to sing a song. Some of us are going to sing a song. So, Love Will Guide Us is, I hope, going to be on the screens, and we'll see what we can do with that. There are 5 of these verses, and like last week, if you wish to rise up to sing these, please do so. If you wish to stay seated and sing these, please do so. If you wish to not sing, please don't. Let's do whatever we want to do this morning. Sorta. Oh, okay, let's not go that far. Let's try the song. Love will guide us. Rise up if you wish. Welcome to church this morning. My name is Cleaver Van Zandt. I'm a minister here at the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Venice, where we strive to be a beacon of liberal religion for Florida's Suncoast and a refuge for all who seek a welcoming community, no matter your color, creed, ability, or class, no matter who you love, no matter your gender expression, your political affiliation, your religious belief, or lack of it. Here we celebrate our differences as we learn from one another. I think the first thing to say this morning is that we had great plans this morning for the AV system, and Erin Fangboner, who was going to operate that system, wrote me at 7 o'clock saying she was in the emergency room, and she has now been admitted to the hospital. She's had heart issues for some time, and they just got worse this morning. So let's hold Erin in our thoughts and prayers. And also Rich Canarelli in our thoughts and prayers as he sits at the AV table. We are not attempting to live stream this morning, so you can say whatever you want and it won't go out. But we are trying to get the screens to work, and we're trying to record so that we can post it later. So it's a different day in terms of AV for us. but Aaron is in the hospital. Each month we take up a special offering for a social service or social justice organization. This month's special offering is All Faiths Food Bank. For each dollar given, All Faiths can supply 5 meals, which is important now more than ever. COVID-19 has increased the food insecurity in our community, and the numerous business closures have affected lower income families and people with hourly wages in particular. Until September 30th, the Raquet Family Foundation will match your generosity up to $100,000 to ensure that twice as many of our struggling neighbors receive the healthy food they need to thrive. Please go to our website at uucov.org, hit the donate button there, and give as generously as you can. Or if you're here in the sanctuary, donation boxes are available on your way out. As usual, please make checks payable to UCOV with All Faiths in the memo line. Thank you for all of your generosity. Is there anybody who's here for the first time this morning? Or the second or third time? The 150th. Yeah, okay. That's okay. It's been an interesting year, hasn't it? I am thrilled to be able to say that Lisa Frank is back this week. And our prelude is Prelude in E minor by Frédéric Chopin. This prelude will begin our worship. Call to worship comes this morning from Reverend Scott Taylor of the Soul Matters group. May the flame we now kindle light the path back to our center, back to that place of belonging again to our deepest self. And may our chalice remind us that we are held and welcomed whole without the need to hide a single piece or part of who we are. Let us worship together. Our first hymn will be It Sounds Along the Ages. I believe there are 3 verses. I hope they are. They are coming up on the screens. And I invite you again to rise up as you wish, as you're willing and able. So I hope we can see that on the screens. This is, I Call That Church Free. It comes from the 20th century theologian and teacher, James Luther Adams. I call that church free which enters into covenant with the ultimate source of existence. It binds together families and generations, protecting against the idolatry of any human claim to absolute truth or authority. This covenant is the charter of responsibility and the joy of worship in the face of death as well as life. I call that church free, which brings individuals into a caring, trusting fellowship. That protects and nourishes their integrity and spiritual freedom that yearns to belong to the Church Universal. It is open to insight and conscience from every source. It bursts through rigid tradition, giving rise to new and living language, to new and broader fellowship. It is a pilgrim church, a servant church, honoring the measure of the Spirit. The goal is the prophethood and priesthood of all believers, the one for the liberty of prophesying, the other for the ministry of healing. It is to find unity and diversity under the promptings of the Spirit that bloweth where it listens and maketh all things new. We have a choral response. Songs of faith and hope. for indulging me in that. Let's see if this works. Sounds okay to me. If you've brought any celebrations with you to church this morning, I'll bring you the microphone. But not all at once. Any celebrations?
No red tide.
Amen to that.
Sorry. On Friday the 13th last month, my house was struck by lightning, and a number of appliances, needless to say, were fried, and I had just finished completing the repairs on all of this under warranties and and finding men who will come and bring the right part the second time, or maybe the third time, but I'm now done.
Congratulations. Other celebrations. I have a celebration in that I have a wife living with me again. She's back from Austin. Her mother is in assisted living and settled. Linda's a little bit worse for wear and tear, but she's going to do some detoxing and it'll be all better soon. If you've brought any sorrows with you to church this morning, I'll bring you the mic.
Good morning. I lost my 27-year-old son on August 17th.
Oh. What's his name? Daniel. Other sorrows. The gratitude and celebrations among us this day become a blessing to us all. And may the concerns and sorrows of each of us be carried in all our hearts. A burden shared, become a load lightened. Now let's join in a spirit of prayer and meditation that will begin with words from the Reverend Viola Abbott, minister of Coastal Virginia Unitarian Universalists in Virginia Beach, Virginia. Loving inclusion has been an elusive goal within our congregations. Pulpits and pews, which should have been warm and welcoming, were instead sometimes cold and unforgiving. Many hearts have been and often continue to be broken time and again. Our beauty as individuals and as congregations is that we are all different and yet not so different from one another. None of us should be considered exceptions, nor should we be subjected to baseless assumptions. We are a covenantal people, and the promise of our faith, which was enough to bring us together, should have been enough to bind us together in love. We are a covenantal people, and the promise of our faith should be enough to bind us together in love. We are a covenantal people, and the promise of our faith is enough to bind us together in love. We lift up those in this community who face change, challenge, or loss this day, as we hold within our hearts all who suffer. Now we pray, each in our own ways, into the silence. The hopes of this community are offered forth in the names of all those who've gone before and in the names of all those who will come after. In the names of all the helpers of humankind. Shalom, salam, amen, and blessed be. The interlude is Auf Flügeln des Gesanges, which is a transcription by Franz Liszt on a piece by Felix Mendelssohn based on a poem by Heinrich Heine. Translation, On Wings of Song. Lisa Frank is at our piano. first time I ever stepped inside a Unitarian Universalist church building for a Sunday service, now nearly 40 years ago, I didn't really know what I was looking for. I didn't know what it was I needed. I had no idea what to expect. I hadn't been in a religious setting, of my own accord anyway, in 20 years at least. If I wasn't really sure at that moment why I was there, I was certain that if whoever spoke that day used the words God or Jesus more than 3 times, I was out of there. You might say I was nervous. You might say I was angry. Before a word was said from the pulpit, a high school-aged violinist stepped out front and proceeded to fill that beautiful old space with the most transcendent music I'd heard in a long time. I was hooked. You'll notice it was the music I remember, not anything that anybody said. But a minister did speak that day, and apparently he didn't say the words God or Jesus more than 3 times because I kept coming back. That man became my minister. I didn't know I needed one. John Robinson was the son and scion of a venerable old New England family. Is there any other kind of New England family? And as a minister of liberal religion, he was surprisingly conservative in many ways. Mostly, he wanted to conserve the long-held traditions of his hereditary and my then adopted religion and faith. And though my guy didn't talk over much about God or Jesus, he did talk a lot through the years about something called the free church. I don't know about your background in any of this, but we did this responsive reading a couple of minutes ago about the free church that was written by Reverend Dr. James Luther Adams, Unitarian theologian who had taught my minister, John Robinson, at the University of Chicago back in their day. So what's a free church? Free in this instance doesn't mean it comes without cost. Doesn't mean it's cheap or even inexpensive. Free in this case has to do not with being free of charge, but having to do with freedom. Freedom of belief, freedom of action, the freedom to be you and me. When Unitarian Universalists use the term free church, one of the things that means is a free church as opposed to a state-supported church, like the Puritan and Congregationalist ones of New England were before so many became Unitarian around the turn of the 18th into the 19th century. Unitarian churches then often did receive tax money from state governments. Massachusetts disestablished the practice finally in 1834. New Hampshire churches were still state-supported, many, until 1877. Free doesn't just mean free in terms of financial support. Free churches make their own decisions in their own ways about governing themselves. Each independent congregation, as a self-governing body, like this one, is free from the control of any higher church authority. No popes, no cardinals, no bishops. Sure, there's the larger Unitarian Universalist Association, headquartered in Boston. We're a part of that. But decisions about what happens here are not made in Boston. They're made here by the persons who have committed themselves to the rights and responsibilities of membership in this congregation. Likewise, members of this covenanted community are free. They're beyond free. They're responsible for forming their own beliefs. They're expected to participate and contribute in the manner they themselves deem appropriate. So then, two words have become intrinsically linked for me in this context: free and responsible. Not only are you free to form your own beliefs, you are responsible for doing so. Now, I think that's different than what we hear in some parts of society today, where people are so very keen to scream about their freedoms, not to do this and that, not to get a vaccination, not to wear a mask, not to let other people vote. For me, that ignores the flip side of freedom, which is responsibility. Responsibility to care for one's neighbors, responsibility for the public health, the public good, responsibility to uphold the rights of others. So this is an old tradition among us, but it all comes down to us Unitarian Universalists in this new world today, enshrined in the fourth principle, which is on the screen. This fourth principle says that we will engage in a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. We are free, but we're also responsible. So if that's a free church, what about a free pulpit? As your settled minister, I have a letter of agreement with this congregation. It's between you and me. There's a line in there that appears in virtually all Unitarian Universalist parish ministers' letters of agreement. And it appears there because it's a central component of Unitarian Universalist tradition and polity. It's a key safeguard of freedom within our religion and a cornerstone of the free church tradition, at least in this country. So we've got that on a slide. If you could go to the letter of agreement in this, Article 2.3.1 says, "It is the basic premise of this congregation that the pulpit is free and untrammeled. The minister is expected to express his or their values, views, and commitments without fear or favor." The minister is expected, not allowed, not invited, not encouraged. The minister is expected to express his or their values, views, and commitments without fear or favor. This is not a polite courtesy that congregations offer their clergy, nor is it a legal nicety. This is an obligation. I take it as a spiritual and a moral obligation that comes with the call to ministry in a Unitarian Universalist congregation. Expressing my values, views, and commitments is not something I get to do if I just sort of feel like it. It's something I must do, regardless of how I feel about it. And I must say, regardless of whether you like it or don't, or whether you agree with what I say or don't. It's hard to precisely locate the beginnings of this free pulpit tradition. One could look to the Act of Religious Tolerance and Freedom of Conscience that was signed by King John Sigismund of Transylvania. Surely you remember him as the only Unitarian king in history after Francis David convinced him of the truth of Unitarianism back at the Diet of Torda. 1568? See, I knew it. You can flick that through, please. If you don't remember all of that, don't worry. Here's what that act says. In every place, and this is 1568 language, in every place preachers shall preach and explain the gospel, each according to his, we say her there, understanding of it, and if the congregation like it, well. If not, no one shall compel them, for their souls would not be satisfied. That means I have an obligation to speak my truth. If you really don't like it, you can ask me to leave. This is considered the first statement, this act of religious tolerance. The first statement of religious tolerance in the Western world. And it's Unitarian. Another passage one hears quoted in discussions of the free pulpit tradition comes at the end of a sermon by the Unitarian minister Theodore Parker, the mid-19th century. The Transient and the Permanent in Christianity was a sermon delivered at the ordination of Charles Shackford at the Hawes Place Church in Boston in 1841. Talking to that congregation about how they should relate to their new minister, Parker said this: "The truth speaks in 1,000 tongues, and with a pen graves her sentence on the rock forever. You may prevent the freedom of speech in this pulpit if you will. You may hire your servants to preach as you bid, to spare your vices and flatter your follies, to prophesy smooth things and say, 'It is peace,' when there is no peace. Yet in doing so, you would weaken and enthrall yourselves. On the other hand, you may encourage your brother," he said, "to tell you the truth. You will then have his best words, his brightest thoughts, and his most hearty prayers." That's all ancient history, of course. This is a pulpit, a very nice one, handmade by Dave Williams of our congregation, as are so many other pieces in here. But that free pulpit sentence in my letter of agreement is not about this lovely piece of furniture. It is about the concept of the person you call as your minister speaking to you in a formal setting, whether it's from behind this piece of furniture or from the floor of the sanctuary or from out in the field or out at the beach. It is this act of speaking rather than the location of the speaking that is important. Now, another thing is that when a congregation like this calls a minister, the congregation's pulpit, in other words, not the furniture, but the function of formal speaking, is placed in the care of that minister. We had a ritual that did that. The called minister then has freedom of the pulpit, but also they have the responsibility of the pulpit. The responsibility to speak the truth as they have come to know it, and the responsibility of seeing that the truth is spoken by others who occupy that space and that function. I don't take the responsibility you've handed me lightly. I hope you don't either. Well, the concept of the free pulpit is closely related to the concept of the free pew. I found an excerpt from an essay by the retired Unitarian Universalist minister, Reverend Susan Lamar, that I think explains these things about as well as one can. Reverend Susan says this: There are two time-honored institutions in Unitarian Universalist churches that are or should be guarded by clergy and laity alike as if they were the Holy Grail. It's the free pulpit and the free pew. The free pulpit means that when a congregation lends its pulpit to a minister by calling that minister as its spiritual leader, the congregation pledges complete and unencumbered freedom of speech to say anything from that pulpit that he, she, they believe are true. That freedom is not something the preacher is born with, but originates in this bond of affection, the covenant established and lived into between the congregation and its minister. She continues, the free pew means that when a Unitarian Universalist congregation is gathered by a bond of affection, which is a covenant which makes it into a spiritual community, the most sacred agreement made is that no theological test will be given for membership in that congregation. Everything else in any of our churches may be unique to that particular congregation, and yet all of our congregations provide and protect the free pulpit and the free pew as Unitarian Universalists. The bonds of love keep open the gates of freedom. Being Unitarian Universalists, we are free to go wherever the search for truth may lead. Our fourth principle says we will embark on a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. It doesn't give you a limit to that search. Nothing says this far and no farther. As a it is up to you to engage your own search as far and as wide as you may, as you wish, as you can. The free pew then means you retain the freedom to come and go from that pew as you choose. And while you do so, you have no limits on your theological or philosophical meanderings and commitments. But the flip side of having that freedom is that you also have a responsibility. If you're occupying one of these free pews, in our sanctuary, there are chairs, actually. If you're watching online, it's your couch or your poolside chair or wherever it is you're sitting. Wherever you are, this free pew idea confers upon you a responsibility to take in what is said and done, and then to go out and test the truth of it in your own life, through your experience and your reason and your imagination. You don't just accept what is said and done here, you test it yourself. That sounds like a lot of work. And it is. Gosh, it would be easier to simply have someone tell you what to do and what to believe, wouldn't it? I'm afraid I wouldn't do well under those circumstances, though, and I strongly suspect that you might not either. When I first stepped into a Unitarian Universalist sanctuary, I wasn't really sure what I was looking for. I didn't know what it was I needed. I certainly couldn't have imagined all the things I would learn, all the ways I would grow. Couldn't imagine the person I would become. Now, 40 years on, I'm still learning, I'm still growing, I'm still becoming. On my best days, I'm still on the path. I hope it may be the same for you. I do know that it's good to have companions on this long, long walk. So may it be. Our hymn is Spirit of Life. Again, you may rise up as you wish. We will sing, we'll have a lead in and then a verse in English and a verse in Spanish. Comes from Elie Wiesel. No one is as capable of gratitude as one who has emerged from the kingdom of night. We know that every moment is a moment of grace, every hour an offering. Not to share them would mean to betray them. Our lives no longer belong to us alone. They belong to all those who need us desperately. Go in peace, walk softly on your paths, and may the light of love shine on you all your days.